In an interview with PlayStation Blog, Arc System Works producer Takeshi Yamanaka had the following to say on the topic of choosing characters for Marvel Tokon Fighting Souls.
There are so many amazing Marvel characters that it was quite a struggle to choose our roster. But we did have some criteria for the selection process. First and foremost, we wanted to include characters who we feel to be the face of Marvel. At the same time, we also needed to select characters that would give us a balance of battle types and styles. Lastly, we wanted to sprinkle in a few surprises and leave room for characters who have never been playable in a fighting game before.
Never been playable in a fighting game before, eh? iPod Nano. How many Marvel characters have ever been playable in Marvel Contest of Champions alone?
As of June 6, 2025, the mobile fighting game Marvel Contest of Champions has had 303 playable characters.
Well, I think it's safe to say Yamanaka wasn't keeping this game in mind when he said that, but I'm gonna pretend he did, because it'll make the video more interesting.
If you clicked on this video expecting a hyper-rational estimation of what Marvel characters AcrSys might include in Tokon who've not appeared in an MVC or X-Men fighter before, you might just be in for a surprise. As my hyper-advanced data processing technology just proclaimed, if you count Contest of Champions as a fighting game, which it is, odds are spectacularly high that any Marvel character you want to see in Tokon who'd never been in an MVC game before will have likely been in at least that game, including many of my favorite Marvel characters who've never been playable in an MVC game before, like the Silver Surfer, the Wasp, and the ever-loving Red-Eyed Man-Thing. That said, not every character I've ever wanted to see in a Marvel fighter has been in Contest of Champions, and not every character who's somewhat popular with Marvel right now has either. And it should go without saying, Marvel has been making comic books and related materials for 86 years. So there are still hundreds, nay, probably thousands, of other Marvel characters that will likely never be in a fighting game just going by pure statistics.
So for today's video, I want to discuss with you some characters who meet the criteria of never having been playable in a fighting game before, taken to this Contest of Champions including Extreme, and rank them in two very different yet equally worthwhile ways.
On the spectrum of neurological divergency, my brain falls within the gradient wherein catharsis is attained via the construction of visually pleasing organized lists. So shortly after reading Mr. Yamanaka's quote upon which this video is predicated, I wound up making what could be seen as a roster unto itself of 24 Marvel characters who've never been in a fighting game before, sorted in 6 groups of 4, because Tokon is a 4v4 after all. To be perfectly blunt with you, the selection of characters I've got here has gone through many phases. There are actually quite a few characters I considered but ultimately left off because if I had any hope of getting a video out on this topic, I'd have to draw the line somewhere. As I go through each group and discuss each fighter, I will place each one on 2 tier lists. One based on how likely I believe their actual inclusion in Tokon may be, and one based on how much I would like for it to happen. And each of the 2 tier lists have 4 tiers, respectively. For the one ranking likeliness, they are, I'd be surprised if they aren't at least referenced in the game, I wouldn't be too surprised if they're playable, I would be extremely surprised if they're playable, and there's no way. For the one ranking my own personal wants, they are my favorites, I would die. They'd be very cool. I have no particular fondness for them, but I'm sure they'd be cool. And I could do without them, TBH.
With no further ado, VCR, initiate tier list procedure.
Our first group of 4 is one I've labeled Most Known Heroes. Let's assess them each in alphabetical order, why not? Armor is one of Marvel's more recent and quasi-recognizable X-Men. Her mutant powers allow her to generate an exoskeleton made of unbreakable energy. And she's Japanese. I don't know whether or not that helps her case for being playable, but you know, this game is very proudly and fiercely Japanese, so much so that the team's motto for this game is, From Japan to the World. In terms of likeliness, I'd rank her in the wouldn't be too surprised tier. As for my own interest, I'd rank her in the no particular fondness tier. Jeff, the stupid idiot goo goo gaga lay wholesome Reddit meme heckin' pupper landshark, is one of the only original characters conceived post-2016 Secret Wars to retain a following because he plays into a lowest common denominator surface level appeal that extends no further than the utterance of "aww." I'm only joking, guys. I don't actually hate Jeff the stupid idiot goo goo gaga lay wholesome Reddit meme heckin' land shark. It's just a bit, don't worry. He made it into the popular hero shooter Marvel Rivals, and he hasn't been in Contest of Champions, probably because that game only uses characters that can be tracked onto 3 or 4 bipedal skeleton rigs. In terms of likeliness, he's top tier. I'd be surprised if he's not in the game at some level. In terms of my own personal wants though, this may come as a shock to you, but I could do without Jeff the stupid idiot goo goo gaga lay wholesome Reddit meme heckin' land shark. Luna Snow is another playable character in Marvel Rivals, who was actually introduced in a different non-fighting Marvel mobile game, Future Fight. She's like a K-pop star with ice powers or something, I don't know. Like Armor, I wouldn't be too surprised if she's playable in Tokon. And like Jeff the SIGGLWRMHP Landshark, I could personally do without her, TBH. And last up for the most known heroes, Moon Girl is a literal child of the all-new, all-different Marvel movement, who's a super genius and is partnered with the literal red-headed stepchild of Jack Kirby's Marvel creations, Devil Dinosaur. I was surprised to learn she isn't in Contest of Champions. She's among the most notable and frequently represented modern Marvel characters. Probably the only legacy mantle character to completely supplant most people's memory of the character from which he proceeds. I mean, she has her own TV show for crying out loud. In terms of likeliness, she's in the top tier. I straight up do not believe Tokon won't at least include Devil Dinosaur in a Savage Land stage or something. We all saw the Triceratops in that video. As for my personal wants, I have no particular fondness, but I'm sure they'd be cool to play. Especially if Moon Girl is always on DD's back. Just a big old T-Rex and a tag fighter. That's what life's all about. Now we move on to our next team of 4, most known villains. The Mandarin is a character who's gone through a couple transmogrifications throughout the years, due to his original portrayal being deemed a pretty racially insensitive one. Nonetheless, the character continues to enjoy some prominence as a force of evil in the Marvel Universe, especially given his magical artifacts, the 10 Rings. I wouldn't be too surprised if he's playable, but I could do without him, TBH. Paste Pot Pete is a recurring foe of the Fantastic Four, who wields a super-powered glue gun. I seem to recall him rebranding himself to the Trapster at some point during John Byrne's run in the 80s, but based on Google image results, I guess he's back to calling himself Paste Pot. Contemporary Marvel writers love their quirky kooks. Now, why on earth have I included him here, in the most known category of all places? Well, the reason is this. I seem to recall a data mine from Marvel Rivals claiming he'd be playable that got my social media feed in a tizzy for a good while there, until it was revealed that his name, along with some others, were decoys in the game's files to throw leakers off the scent of actual newcomers to the game. Very clever. Anywho, since that incident, PPP has accrued a somewhat vocal fanbase. Marvel fans love their quirky kooks too. I would be extremely surprised if he got into Tokon, because come on, let's be serious. But as for my own taste, I think he'd be pretty cool. I love my quirky kooks too. White Rabbit is an organized crime member and quasi-frequent Spider-Man villain. She's mad as a March hare, kickboxes, and is rich enough to afford all the self-branded supervillain weapons one could want. She came to mind as I was checking the Contest of Champions wiki for obscure characters, because since Tokon is a full-throttle anime game, I thought it'd be appropriate to include a bunny girl character. Plus, most of Marvel's most known cat girls have been in COC. Sorry, Tigra. As thematically appropriate as I think a bunny girl fighter would be, though, I'd be extremely surprised if she's playable. But for my taste, I think she'd be pretty cool. Now, our last most known villain of this bunch may also be one of the most known in all Marvel villaindom too. It's none other than Baron Helmut Zemo.
Oopsie doodle, Zemo is in Contest of Champions. Shoot, we need a last-minute replacement for him. She's not necessarily a well-known villain, but Necroco, a recent Venomverse character who's a Japanese magic girl with a Venom symbiote, that works for a fighting game, right? In fact, it's very AcrSys coded. You know what? Yeah, absolutely. She's almost, I wouldn't be too surprised if she's playable. And you know what? She seems very cool too. Okay, let's move on.
Can you tell yet that the groups to come are gonna mostly be personal favorites and deep cuts? Okay, we're moving on from most known type beats now. Let's transition into the world of deep cuts, starting with a group of 4 I call funny first and foremost. Beverly Switzler is a veterinarian and Howard the Duck's girlfriend. If you've seen my MVC4 roster video, you know that I think she's the ultimate choice for a comedy wildcard character, as A, it'd be funny to come this close to including Howard without actually including him, and B, she's probably the most reasonable character to use as a conduit for other comical animal Marvel characters, like Hellcow, Cosmo the Space Dog, or the all-animal animal rights protection squad Brute Force. As you can probably tell, I think there's no way she'll be playable in Tokon, but for me personally, she is a top-tier favorite. I would die if she were in the game. Death's Head is one of those deep-cut Marvel characters who people tend to love more for the story of how he came to be, rather than him actual self. He's a 90s type over-designed bounty hunter who originates from a run of Transformer comics that were set within Marvel's actual mainline 616 continuity. Through a series of creative choices and legal tightrope walking that many YouTube video essays have been made about, Marvel has somehow retained the rights to this guy, and he even got a Marvel Legends figure recently. So there's no question that Marvel definitely own him still. I say he'd be funny first and foremost, but honestly, I think with his design and cavalcade of weapons, he'd actually be a pretty damn fun fighting game character. But like most characters in this category, there's no way he's actually gonna be playable. And for my personal tastes, he's not a top tier favorite, but I think he'd be very cool. Okay, I know I haven't been giving many warnings prior to revealing characters on the list so far, but this is one I am extremely confident you could not guess no matter how hard you tried. This is a deep cut. I'm gonna give you 5 seconds to guess, and I'll even give you a hint. This villain debuted during Steve Gerber's run of the Defenders. If you know, boy do you ever know. And if you don't, no Googling. 5 seconds. Start now. Go ahead. Guess. Okay. Elf with a gun is an elf with a gun. This character only appeared in interstitials. His motivation was never revealed, and he died getting hit by a random car and was never addressed again. This is why Steve Gerber is one of my favorite comic writers, man. Obviously, there's no way Elf with a gun is going to be a playable character in Marvel Tokon, and I'm not so vapid that he's one of my top tier favorites either, but I do think he'd be very cool. And now our last funny first and foremost fighter, one who's slightly more mainstream than most. Slapstick was once your ordinary teenage troublemaker Steve Harmon, but after being transformed into a living cartoon by an interdimensional clown, he now works as a superhero who wreaks animated mayhem on evildoers. If that description alone doesn't make you want to see him in a fighting game, I don't know what will. Marvel Tokon is a beautifully animated game by the looks of things so far, and I've been dying to see him properly animated for years. It would be awesome to see him come to life in this game, but realistically, I'd be very surprised if he made it in.
Okay, that's 3 out of 6 categories covered. Before we move on to the final 3 groups with a dozen characters among them, I'd like to take a brief intermission to talk about 4 playstyles I'd like to see in Marvel Tokon. Firstly, I hope there's a character who plays like Blackheart from MVC2, or straight up is Blackheart from MVC2. Someone who's tall and heavy, can get reasonable air coverage, and throw out some projectiles that travel the stage in unorthodox ways. Secondly, I'd like a close-range grappler with decent escape/parry options. I feel like grapplers tend to get under a lot of people's skin, but I find I'm at my most engaged in fighting games not when I'm trying to pull off a string of inputs that I think will guarantee me a combo, but when I'm attempting and countering strong and satisfying moves during the heat of things, I think it's why ARMS clicks with me so hard, and why I seem to be the only guy who wants to play Plasma Blade in CFC2. Thirdly, I'd like a character whose attributes can be altered during fights, like Phoenix Wright gathering evidence, or Masango from ARMS with his 3-phase mask, or Shulk's Monado arts in Smash, Lastly, I'd like a character who is just ridiculously and comically unviable as a leader. This is a 4v4 tag fighter where players have the option of just maining one character with 3 assists. I look at MVC characters like Servbot and Norimaru, and I just think to myself, man, will fighting games ever let us have this type of fun ever again? I mean, Smash sorta did with Piranha Plant, but that character is just actually good, regardless of the fact it's the plant obstacle from Mario. I'd want this character to be so bad that even the most skilled players in the world wouldn't be ballsy enough to attempt maining them. Yet at the same time, everyone would love them, because that's clearly the point of their existence. Okay, intermission over. Let's get back to the obscure Marvel characters who've never been in a fighting game before, shall we?
The next group of 4 is called Miscellaneous Humanoid Ladies, which should tell you a lot about how disparate my range of characters and number of categories were before I trimmed it down to be production friendly. Cloud9 is one of those 50 States Initiative Marvel characters who's always at the forefront of my mind when thinking about that era. because her name, her aviator gear, and her power to summon superpowered clouds is just so perfectly attuned to everything she's got going on conceptually. That said, I'd be extremely surprised if she were playable in Tokon. Despite how I just complimented her, I don't really have any particular fondness for her, but she'd be cool. The Brood Hunter Crew is a pretty obscure Marvel alien character, genetically altered specifically to fight the recurring X-Men Captain Marvel villain, Brood. In terms of visual design and storytelling, she's a blend of a lot of what I love about Marvel Comics characters. She transforms, she's got a pretty cool monster design, she's got fluid technology drawn as a series of tubes. She goes from being perceived as an inhuman monster to being revealed to have undergone a huge selfless sacrifice for the good of something bigger than herself in her debut, and I doubt many other people than me even care that she exists, which would make seeing her turn up in something, anything, to any extent, all the more special. That said, there is no way she's in Tokon. But unsurprisingly, she's a favorite of mine, and I would die, I tell ya. Jennifer Kale is another Steve Gerber character I quite like. She was once a carefree teenager into scary movies and the occult and all that stuff that teenage girls liked in the 70s, but discovered inadvertently while snooping through her grandfather's library that she is a descendant of spellcasters, and started a road that led her to becoming a practicing sorceress whose mishaps created a lot of messes for the Man-Thing to clean up. To the point where she is partially responsible for revealing to us that Theodore Salis was not just an unfortunate victim of scientific accident, but destined to be the mystic guardian of the nexus of all realities. So yeah, full disclosure, in an earlier conception of this video, I would have used Jen as a way of including Man-Thing in a most wanted characters from Marvel Tokon who've never been in a fighting game before type of list, without, actually including him, because he's been in Contest of Champions. But with the way the video has turned out now, Jen is just a hanger-on who I believe has no chance of being playable in Tokon, but who I personally think would be very cool. I can't call her a top-tier favorite though, because if she got in and not Manny, I'd be furious. Now for our last miscellaneous humanoid female, we've got Shanna the She-Devil, a protector of the Savage Land and wife of Khazar. Think of her as Jane from Tarzan, except her affinity is for leopards instead of apes, and she had already resolved to embrace the jungle lifestyle before she met the Monkey Man. I was quite surprised to find she isn't playable in Contest of Champions, but I'd be even more surprised if she were to be playable in Marvel Tokon. As for my own personal tastes, I have no particular fondness for her, but I'm sure she'd be cool. Okie dokie. Now we move on to Group 5 of 6, Miscellaneous Humanoid Gentlemen. Living Laser is one of two characters I've included in this group who are among the first in my mind when I think of generic Marvel villains, who aren't necessarily an Iron Man villain or an Avengers villain, but just a villain, a sort of hench person when you need a team of villains on the Masters of Evil or something. As his name implies, his whole body is a laser. Wouldn't that be neat to control in a fighting game? Well, be that as it may, I'd be extremely surprised if Living Laser got into Tokon, but I think he'd be very cool. Machine Man is one of my very favorite Marvel superheroes. I love him so much. I don't understand why he never caught on the way other heroes like Thor, Hawkeye, or even freaking Wonder Man did, but I digress. As much as I love old X-51, I would be extremely surprised if he were to be playable in Tokon, especially considering most of his moveset potential exists in characters like Iron Man, Rocket Raccoon, and even Mr. Fantastic. But as you can probably tell, he's a favorite for me. I'd die. Oh, and Disney, if you're looking for an MCU Ryan Gosling vehicle, look no further than this guy. I'm telling you, you're sitting on a gold mine. Tiger Shark, like Living Laser, is one of those Marvel villains I think of when I think generically about hench-level Marvel rogues. Dude's an evil shark man. Not a stupid idiot goo goo gaga lay wholesome Reddit meme heckin' pupper shark man, but a tiger shark man. Yeah! What more could you want? Well, from a fighting game, probably a bit more than that. I don't know, I don't think there's any way this guy's gonna be playable in Tokon, but I think he'd be cool. Now for the last of the miscellaneous humanoid men, the Two-Gun Kid is one of Marvel's earliest characters, a holdover from their time doing westerns, which was the style at the time. Still, he's continued to be referenced and occasionally utilized in Marvel superhero stories going forward. And hey, if Tokon Fighting Souls is from Japan to the world, why shouldn't they want to include a cowboy? It's one of the last truly beloved American archetypes there is. But I digress. I'd be extremely surprised to see Two-Gun Kid in Tokon, but I think he'd be very cool.
Okay, Last group of 4 now, and this one contains some of my favorite picks.
Our previous 2 groups were miscellaneous humanoid ladies and miscellaneous humanoid men, so now it's time for the miscellaneous monstrous characters. Brood is a recurring alien villain to the X-Men and Captain Marvel. It's like a xenomorph with Ridley from Metroid Sociopathy, the invaders from Mars Attacks Relentlessness, and the bugs from Starship Troopers Bugliness. I don't know why, but for some reason Brood seems like the sort of character you think would have been playable in an obscure PS2 X-Men fighting game or something. But nope, never was. I can easily imagine her summoning little clones of herself on the battlefield, wreaking havoc and all that. Still and all, fighting games tend to favor bipedal, reasonably sized fighters. So I'd be extremely surprised if Brood got into Tokon. And honestly, I have no particular fondness for her, but you know, she'd still be cool. Krugar, on the other hand, is my comfort character. I've gushed about him in my MVC4 roster video before, but yeah, he's got a great design, he's a sorcerer, he's a alien. He's like Blackheart or Man-Thing, but with more swag. What's not to love? Yes, of course he's my favorite, and I would die if he were playable. But there's no way that's happening. Sleepwalker is another favorite standalone hero of mine, up there with the likes of Slapstick and Machine Man. Though unlike those characters, I totally understand why he's not more popular. He's an interdimensional protector of the mindscape, a sort of nexus of all realities tied directly to everyone's dreams. A nightmare creature called Cobweb trapped him in the mind of a college student named Rick Sheridan. So whenever Rick sleeps, Sleepwalker is free to enforce justice in our reality using his reality manipulation powers. But whenever Rick is awake, he remains trapped in Rick's mind. It's a very high concept sort of thing, but it leads to a lot of interesting popcorn stories, which is what you want out of a good comic book run, I think. Now, as for fighting game potential, doesn't he just look cool? Don't tell me he doesn't look cool. He looks cool. And he can do pretty much whatever. His power is that he can manipulate reality like as if you were in a dream. So the devs could take a lot of creative license when it comes to coming up with moves for him. Nevertheless, there's no way Sleepwalker is getting into Tokon, but he is one of my favorites. I would die. Now finally, the last obscure character on my list is one I'm glad just so happened to come up last alphabetically in this group, because she's a fun little rabbit hole unto herself. If you saw the movie Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, you might recall the High Evolutionaries' henchmen Behemoth and Warpig. Warpig in particular getting a good handful of fun action scenes and 1 or 2 lines. Fun fact number 1 about Warpig is that she was played by Judy Greer, because James Gunn has connections, I guess. Fun fact number 2 about Warpig is that she's not from any Marvel comic book. Despite having a look that totally screams 80s to 2000s intergalactic henchmen, with tubular mech gear, jets firing from all directions, and full-page action shots full of roaring with tusks at the ready, this character was just invented for the movie. Weird, right? I only found out about this because I thought the character design is somewhat fun and could easily translate to something that looks like Marvel Cosmic Invasion or something. But now that I know that Warpig is a movie original character, so should you. There is absolutely no way on Earth this extremely minor character is getting a playable spot in Marvel Tokon Souls. And while I may have been tempted at one time to say I have no particular fondness for this character, I do now. She's not a favorite, but she'd be very cool. And so, there you have it. 24 Marvel characters who've never been in a fighting game before. Not even Contest of Champions, ranked relative to their chances of being included on Tokon's roster, and how much I'd personally love to see it happen.
Now it's your turn to bring up some obscure Marvel characters you want to see in Tokon Fighting Souls. I don't care if you look up whether or not they've been in Contest of Champions or not, I just want to hear who you're championing to be our surprise inclusions for this game. Everybody's got obscure favorites, and if you don't yet, you'll find one. Autogyro. Initiate Endslate, where I ask viewers to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you to my Patreon patrons for supporting the show financially. It really helps a lot. If you join their ranks, you get early access to videos and behind-the-scenes updates, and I'll give you a little sneak peek of a behind-the-scene update right now. As I record this, it's June 15th, 16th? I'm about to start grading summer school projects, and all sorts of other stuff is getting underway, so the frequency with which I've been releasing videos might change, so join the Patreon if you want it more regularly and stuff like that. I don't know, bye.